very happy to introduce David Lindo, the urban birder. I met David in Israel last November during a bird migration festival where he was a participant and an invited presenter. And we were at a hide looking at some birds, and I brought my glasses into a ditch, and he very gallantly jumped way down into the mud and brought it up to me, and he started to talk, and he says he comes to LA quite often. He lives in London. And I said, gee, if you're ever next time in LA, let me know, and I'll invite you to stay at Bed and Bagels, my place in Tucson, and try to organize some places where you can meet other birders and interesting people. So,
I'd like to thank my publicist, Sharon, for such a great intro, and plus for looking after me and actually introducing me to everyone here and to birding in Tucson and life in Tucson. I was just saying to someone earlier, but to me, Tucson, being in the streets of Tucson is like a Sunday every day, just relaxed and chilled, which is nice. There's a house sparrow that really captured my imagination. There were so many of them all over the place, and I know they're here, but they were introduced from Europe, and I just love them. And when I was 6, my parents, in those days when, I don't know what happened back then here, but in those days when the mother was having a baby, she'd be in hospital on her own having a baby, and the father would be at home with his feet up, with a cup of tea, watching TV until the phone rings, and then he rushes off to the hospital to see the newborn. Is that the case here as well? But it was, yeah. But that was the case in my day when I was a kid. And I remember my dad jumping in the car, taking me to the hospital to see my new sister. But instead of going in to see my sister, I was on the hospital green counting sparrows. I was so fascinated by them. And half an hour later, I got dragged in to see my sister by my dad, and I saw it very briefly, and then went back out to check the sparrows out again. Back slightly. When I was 8, I went to the library, so I didn't have any knowledge of birds, as I said before, and I came across 2 books. The first of which was this one, which is Birds of Britain, Europe, North Africa, and Middle East. And when I picked this book up, it was like finding the Holy Scriptures. It was filled with all these birds I've never even heard of, let alone seen. And I was reading the book inside out, sideways, back to front. I took it to primary school, read it during my lessons. My fellow pupils called me bird brain. But by the time I was 8, I knew every single species in that book. I knew where they came from, I knew their colour, the colours that came in, how big they were in inches. I knew everything about it. And I had to take my school friends out on bird trips around the local woods to show them birds. And I always wanted to, as a kid, have a bird in a cage for some reason. I actually hate the idea of it now, but then I did. After reading this book, I discovered my favourite bird of all time, and that bird is this. This bird is not familiar to you because it's European. It's called the ring ouzel, O-U-Z-E-L. The ring ouzel is a thrush, and it's related to your American robin. And the reason why I liked it so much was that in my book it was situated next to Blackbird. And Blackbird, I don't know if you know, but Blackbird is a very common garden bird in Britain, similar to your American robin, the same family. There's about 10 million pairs of Blackbird in Britain compared to maybe 8,000 and decreasing pairs of ring ouzel. Ring ouzels are summer visiting, and they're very different to blackbirds, even though they look similar. The difference is the white crescent on the chest. But they're very different in that they are wild. They live in the wild mountainous areas of Britain. You can't get within half a mile of them, and they're very, very, very shy. And I thought as a kid, when will I ever get to see one of these birds? Who will ever take me to Yorkshire or Scotland to see one of these birds? Well, I have you know, I actually see more of these birds in my local patch in West London, urban West London, than I do in Scotland, Yorkshire, Cornwall, all those places put together multiplied 5 times. The reason for that, for me, is quite simple. And that's Regent's Park and London Zoo, but it's one of the highest points in North London. The birders in the 50s and 60s used to stand on top of this hill, and they discovered that streams of birds would fly past north or south, depending on what season. And I realised it was a migration path. So I wanted to get on top of a tall building to see migration in action. And I got my chance when I discovered, or it's not even discovered, but I had the opportunity, and I talked the management into letting me go on the roof. This is Tower 42, and I'm the founder of the Tower 42 Bird Study Group. And the idea behind it is that every spring and every autumn, a group of us turn up once a week for 4 hours, and we stand on top of the roof of this building, looking across the stupendous views of London, and trying to watch for birds of prey flying across. Now, when I first came up with this thought, the media, both national and local, were quite amazed because no one really has ever talked about birding from rooftops in the middle of the city. But we got a lot of coverage on the news and in the press. But I tell you what, I mean, just being up there, it's amazing to see how the city looks. And it's one of those situations where for the first couple of times you just can't help but sort of say, oh, my mum lives here and I live over there, my girlfriend lives there. You know, you can't help but do that. When you're birding on top of a roof, you have to sort of bear in mind that things don't fly over your head like that. You have to look for it, and it's almost like sea watching. Have you ever done sea watching before? You're not next to a coastline.
For whales?
Well, yeah,
Oh, yeah.
for whales, yeah. But in Britain, there's lots of people, there's a few, it's like a section of birding, which I think is probably the toughest part of birding in terms of the spectrum of whatever you can do from backyard birding to that. And it's basically sitting by the coast in all weathers for hours on end with your telescope, just looking out to sea and seeing a small dot a mile away and thinking, oh, that's an auk or that's a gannet or something. Well, it's like that on a roof because you have to look on the horizon and see a small dot and follow that dot. And don't take your eye off it, because once you do, you lose it. So you have to learn where your landmarks are, and when you see something, you shout out and say, it's flying past Big Ben now, quick, you know. And that's how we get onto things. 9 times out of 10, you're looking at things like gulls, but occasionally you get birds of prey. Every time we're up there, every time we see peregrines. This one looks very tanned. The reason for that is that this picture was taken in Ethiopia. But we have, 24 pairs of nesting peregrine in London, which is incredible when you think that during the Second World War, the entire UK population was around about 60 pairs. They've really learnt about taking over the urban environments, as they have done in North America as well. And we do get the occasional other species of bird of prey. This is a common kestrel, which you don't get here. It's related to your American kestrel, flying across a very famous building. This is the BT Tower. This is a Somali golden-breasted bunting. I had to show you this because it's so gorgeous. But going back to the force and positivity, when I was in Kenya, on the first day, was taken to a nature reserve. And this nature reserve was the home of this species called a Sharp's longclaw. Now, Sharp's longclaw is brown, small brown bird with a yellow belly. There's only about 50 in the whole world, and they're all found in Kenya. They're very rare. And the warden said to me, the ranger said to me, that we're going to go out in this field, there's 10 of us, we're going to walk in a line, and basically we're going to try to see if we can flush this bird out. But what he didn't say was that when they do that, maybe 9 times out of 10 they don't see it. It's very secretive. But in my head, we were seeing it, and I was finding it. Simple as that. So I was walking along, and there was quite a lot of brown birds called grassland pipits, which were similar, but they're totally brown. A lot of them were being flushed all the time. I was walking along, and all of a sudden I flushed a bird which I thought had yellow on its belly. So I said to the guy next to me, it's over there. So we walked over to where this bird was, and all of a sudden the brown grassland pipit flew up. And he said to me, oh, that's probably it. I said, no, it's over there. So we took another step, and then the bird flew up, and it was indeed the Sharp's longclaw, and I was so happy. So we all started taking pictures of this bird, and then it flew off. And then the guys said, right, go out, we saw it, and they started walking away. And I was looking at my camera, still in the same position. And then I noticed a bird fly towards me, and it turned out to be the Sharp's longclaw again, but it landed on a bush. And it was sitting on this bush, and then I noticed the warden turn around, the ranger, turn around, and he looked at me, and he came back to me and said to me, I don't believe this. I've been here for 14 days, every day for 14 years, sorry, not 14 days, been here for 14 years, every day, and I've never seen one land in the bush, and then you've come along. The next day, we went to a forest, and we were looking for a bird called crowned eagle. We got to the forest, and the ranger said to us, I'm sorry, the nest was pulled down by baboons yesterday, and it's the wrong time of day. You're not going to see it, it's hardly likely to see. I looked up, and there was one flying over our heads. The next day, we went to an arboretum, And the guy I was with said there's two species of bird here, one in particular called a heart-lobed turroco, which is green with a long tail. And he said they hang out here, but I've not seen one for 6 or 7 years. But then you are lucky, Lindo, aren't you? And then see them in a natural habitat. So that's why I'm not fussed on twitching, really. This is a Taiwan blue magpie. Hopefully might be voted as their national bird because they're having an election. I had an election last year. I'm not sure what the result was, but they're working out what the national bird was. The state bird here is what, the cactus red, is it?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I saw one yesterday, so I'm pretty happy. I was waiting, I was doing a bit of twitching actually, because I was taken to a mountain. I was standing on this road, waiting in the rain for this bird to come out, and whilst I was waiting, this thing ran across my foot. Never seen one before, never even heard of it. It's called a white-whiskered laughing thrush. It was a tick, so I was happy with that. But an hour and a half later, the main event stepped out behind the bush and started pecking around the street, and it was this. This is a swinhoe's pheasant. And it looks as if it's got real cream on it, isn't it? It's just iridescent. It's just so gorgeous. I didn't expect to see something so beautiful step out. And it's flapped its wings, and that white really kicks out in the mist. It's a fantastic looking bird. So I was very happy to see that. Within the shadow of Buckingham Palace, I was leading the tour. I was walking around. I saw this image. I thought, I've got to take a picture of it. I couldn't believe it, but it just shows that in urban birding, anything can turn up anywhere at any time. So urban birding, as far as I'm concerned, is fun. And it's not about having to recognise everything you see. It's all about just enjoying your environment. And conservation starts from your doorstep. And I'm sure most of you feed your birds in your back garden anyway. So that's cool. So that's where it all starts from. And that's it really. I'd like to thank you all for sparing your... If you have any questions, feel free. And by the way, that owl, that's an eagle owl, which is the world's largest owl, European eagle owl, and his name was Cecil Fowler. Cecil Fowler, that's his name.